Hey, there we go. There's quite a few switches, sorry.
Very posh here. This is this main seat in the main.
This is the Great Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see we've got a tower at either end. So when this was a war castle, this room didn't exist. But it was only when the fighting finished, in late Elizabethan times, that they actually started to enhance the castle, so they built this room.
So what are the stories with this room then?
Well, people have talked about, this is staff members, when they've been about to come into the room from either door, they can hear the noise of music and a sort of party going on, which must be a throwback to the days when they used to have big events in here. And of course, when they open the door, there's nobody in here. The wall behind you used to be part of, it's a great big thick wall, was part of the castle's defences. Mm-hmm. And people have often talked about seeing a shadowy figure walking up and down the length of the wall, a bit like an old soldier, maybe patrolling the wall. We've had bits of furniture moving around at the bottom of the room here, chairs and that table. These candlestick things have once or twice come off the table. A colleague of mine, a year or two back, saw the figure of a man walking from the corner across in front of the tapestry and went out the door in the corner there. One of the most famous spirits at the castle here is that of a lady called Lady Mary Grey. She died here in 1719. And when she was alive, she used to carry a pomander full of rose petals around with her. And they say that if you ever come across Lady Mary, you can smell roses. Now, I was in here one night, stood in front of this copper basket thing, and we were just getting ready for an event. And I could feel the cold air come around me. And I got a really vivid, strong smell of roses. So I'm assuming that Lady Mary was having a little wander through. The elephant armour comes from India. The current owner, his family many, many years ago, were part of the old sort of colonial Indian ruling class and in the army and things like that. And they brought a lot of Indian and Eastern artefacts back with them. That's one of the best examples.
Yeah. Near the top here then, is it?
Top of the tower.
Yeah. Oh, that's a view.
Yeah, it's nice. The old Italian garden there.
So how big is it? Like square foot sort of thing?
Well, I think there's about 200 acres now. So these fields you can see around us and behind the castle.
Yeah.
And that's the Edward room.
Right, okay.
I should let you go in
Yeah,
first.
sorry.
Good luck.
This is where a lot of the activity happens. Yeah.
Excuse me, yeah. The Edward room, we get a lot of activity in here. It used to be quite a scary room, a very oppressive room a few years ago, but now it seems to have, the atmosphere's lifted. We used to get people come in and feel really, really claustrophobic. They would instantly get a headache. They would instantly feel quite sick and nauseous, and they would just have to leave. And I would say that of a group of 20 people that would come in here, probably 5 or 6 would feel really rough. So, but since COVID, since we stopped doing tours over COVID, and when we came back in, the atmosphere in the room seems to have lifted somewhat, and it's not quite as oppressive as it used to be. But it's still a very active room. A couple of months ago I was in here and a gentleman got pushed. I thought he tripped on the carpet, but he hadn't. When we looked, he'd been pushed by something in the back, and he'd literally gone right forward. This is the old doorway. So quite often things happen at the old doorway, and as I was chatting away, 4 or 5 of the guests who were standing where you are could see the black shadowy figure of a man standing in the doorway watching us.
So it's not even like it's just one person or 2 people who, it's a lot of people that see,
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, the more people that see things, the better, because it just gives it that realism. It's because some people, and rightly so, they come here and they're very sceptical, and they possibly think that we have some sort of production running here where we have gizmos that project things, or we have devices that make noises. Well, that's just not the case. But so the more people that see things, the better. We've got a lovely gallery up here, and if you could think back to the days when the castle was at war, there'd have been a lot of soldiers up there. And quite regularly people will see a figure walking across the window up there, and they can hear footsteps going around the gallery. We've had things on the table sort of flop over before. That bench behind you decided to pick itself up and flop onto the floor.
I mean, that looks like a heavy bench.
It is quite heavy. Now that big black door there, I was in here one night with a group of ladies, and I was just chatting away, telling them a few stories, and the door flew open and hit the wall, made a really loud bang, and the girls started screaming, and at the same time the metal chandelier started to spin, and there was about 15 of them in the group. They all saw it.
So it's obviously the spinning chandelier seems to be
it's
like
happened
cold,
here and in the tea room. But we had a gentleman come in one night. He was a bit of a joker, and he banged on the bench and he went, you know, if anyone's here, make a tap. And straight away from the doorway, the tapping noise came straight back at him. So that grabbed his attention a little bit. But this was where the lady had her face scratched. You know, when she had the hot sensation around her face.
Is this the room where there's probably most activity then, would you say?
This room, in my experience, this room and the chapel are the two that are ones where you get a lot of things happening. But I would say out of these two, the chapel is the one for me where most of the things will happen. Now, the reason we call this the King Edward room is because King Edward I stayed here in 1298. He was trying to capture William Wallace, that well-known Scottish knight. William Wallace had come down with a small group of followers, and they created a load of problems in the Chatham, Chillingham, Wooler area. And so incensed was King Edward that he brought an army up, and they camped here and rested up, made ready to move further north. And they engaged the Scots in the Battle of Falkirk in 1298. And William Wallace escaped on that occasion, although the army was defeated, the Scottish army. So that's why we call this the King Edward room, because this is the very room that he stayed in. This is quite unique. This is an original document going back to 1344, and this was signed by the king, permission to crenellate the castle, which means sort of enhance the battlements and what have you. So I don't think any other castle displays such a thing as that.
So if people are wanting to do an overnight package thing, what would they do then? Just go on the website and...
The best thing would be to speak to Nikki, who runs all the entertainment events and the accommodation, and she can put a package together. But you can book your own room online, and then you can also book a ghost tour and combine the two. And quite often people will do their own little investigations in the room afterwards, because a lot of the rooms that we have here are quite active. Now just mind your heads, this beam's really low.
Right.
Some of the accommodations on this front bit here.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, we'll go across these rooms here and then we'll come back. Got the keys here. See if we can get in. There we go.
Oh wow.
Tell you what, I just got a bit of a fright with that black mannequin there. That never used to be here when I worked here.
Don't say stuff like
I did, I got a little bit of a fright there.
This is a very posh room as well.
Well, we don't use these rooms on the ghost events because they're a bit too elaborate to have people crashing around in the dark. But these are rooms that are open to day visitors during the season. So we call this room the silk room because of the silk linens. But these were originally a series of 3 rooms that was the royal suite, the king's rooms. So when James VI of Scotland stayed here on his way down to London to become King of England, he stayed in these 3 rooms.
Yeah, beautiful. So I go through that one.
Yeah, sure. Now this one's called the library, or the plaque room, depending on who you talk to. I'll see if I can find the lights. That's the light switch. Yeah, there's one. It's a few years since I worked in here, so I keep forgetting where the lights are.
Yeah, beautiful. And then this one all right as well.
Mm-hmm. So we're now entering, you can see how thick the walls are. We're now entering part of the old castle. So we're back in the tower. Below us is the chapel. And you can see again the old doorway in the corner there.
So this is almost like another banquet kind of style.
Yeah, well this is called the new dining room. I mean, who knows what it used to be used for hundreds and hundreds of years ago, but we've got a beautiful old medieval fireplace, original there. And this was actually the king's bedroom. Excuse me. This was the king's bedroom when James the Sixth stayed here. He stayed in this very room. And this is part of his bed frame here. You can see, it would have, if you can imagine a big, very ornate four-poster bed covered in silk. This is the remnants of it here.
Yeah.
And you get a nice view to the south there, across the south lawn.
Yeah, beautiful.
And through there we've got the museum.
So what would this room have been used for then?
This room was actually two rooms. We had a wall that came out, and this was a bit of a corridor. Now, I believe at one stage this was a nursery, but it was certainly some form of accommodation up here. And as you can see, we've got a fireplace over there. And I think there's two fireplaces there when there were individual rooms. Yeah, he used to be very friendly with Sir Humphrey Wakefield, and he visited many times during his life. And I think the last time he was here was probably about 8-9 years ago. Maybe not. No, maybe not quite. Maybe about 6-7 years ago.
Did he stay the night?
No. It was a sort of flying visit. I think he was on his way to Balmoral, so he called in, had lunch actually in here, and then zipped off. There's no heating in this part of the castle at all. It's cool.
Also, that's the bat. Is that the crest
Yeah.
then? Yeah.
That tea service was commissioned by this gentleman up here who was in the Navy. He's one of the Wakefield family, and he commissioned this rather nice tea service. So we'll go back up the stairs a
Yeah.
little bit. I'll tell you about the Blue Boy. So we're not allowed in, we can't film, but you can get a shot of the door if that's any help to you. Behind there is the pink room. It's quite a lovely room that's used by the owner for his sort of family and friends to stay in. But that's the room that Leonora Tankerville found the body of the small child wrapped in the blue material. And that is where, when she stayed the night, he appeared, the ghostly image of the blue boy.
So is it closed off because of haunted kind of reasons?
No,
then,
no,
or
it's just
did-
part of the private apartments of the owner.
Yeah.
So unfortunately we can't film in there, but it's one of the more well-known stories here of the blue boy. You can also see the decorations on the wall. That gives you an idea of what sort of Victorian Chillingham looked like. All these corridors and stairwells and rooms would have been plastered out and finished to those sort of standards. Now this room here, don't know where you can again go and have a look.
Yeah.
This room's called the artist's room. And again, sometimes he lets his family and friends stay in this room. Now, on several occasions when I've been doing tours, people have seen figures standing in this very doorway where we are now. And the latest one was only a couple of weeks ago, and it was of a lady holding the hand of a small child. And this takes us back into the Great Hall.
Also heard about trees and outside.
Oh, hanging trees, yeah.
hanging trees.
Yes, we have 2 or 3 trees that we believe were here and used for that purpose. So if you want to go and have a look at those, we can have a wander down. There used to be a great big moat here when the castle was at war. And all this would have been just one solid wall, there would have been no entrance point. And the original way to get into the castle was over here. This is the bottom of the dungeon, which is quite interesting. This doorway would never have existed when it was first built, but if you can possibly have a look in, that's the bottom bit. So I would imagine that quite a few people have met a grisly end in there.
Yeah. Again, not that big, the dungeon? No.
No.
Was there a famous executioner as well?
There's a legend of a guy called John Sage, who was supposed to be a torturer and executioner here in the era of Edward I back in 1298. And it's said that his spirit is still here. But whether that is true or not, I haven't come across that personally myself. But it's a very well-known story here at the castle. So if he did exist, then perhaps he went to work in there.
So you would have killed hundreds of thousands or even tens of thousands then? Depending. Well,
he certainly would have been busy. Yeah, there's no doubt of that. Yeah.
And what would that have been? Would that have been, because I know around them times it was a guillotine in France and a few other different things, or
they would have probably hanged them.
Hung, yeah.
Yeah. There are stories of people being left, their bodies being left to rot in the trees around here.
Wow.
Because back in medieval times, it was important that they received a proper Christian burial. And if they didn't, then the fear was that their spirit would be left to wander the earth endlessly, which is why they didn't bury them. They used to punish them in life and in death. So the bodies would be left just to rot and drop to the ground.
So could that possibly be a reason why it might be haunted then?
I do think there's been so much life and death here over the years that's why so many spirits are kind of stuck here at the castle. Yeah. I mean, we have come across, in investigations, we have come across Scottish soldiers, spirits of soldiers who are still here.
Wow. So there was hanging trees, wasn't there? Is that just any...
Just down here, if you'd like to have a look, we can certainly show you them. I don't know how muddy it's going to be, mine.
That's all right.
This through here is where most of the accommodation is.
Yeah.
So I think there's about 6 rooms in there. Now these grounds were all beautifully kept, but when we had Storm Arwen, it brought down all these beautiful trees that were hundreds of years old. So they're still working now to try and clear it all. You don't realise how big they are until they're lying on the ground.
Yeah.
a bit of a mess, isn't it? This was all beautiful woodland prior to the storm coming.
Yeah. It's crazy how it managed to knock with how thick the trees are and
I
stuff.
know.
Thought they might be able to withstand it.
I mean, you see the size of some of them still standing,
Mm-hmm.
and then others have gone. So there's one of our hanging trees. It's a yew tree. Hundreds of years old.
Yeah. It's well out the way then of like view of the castle almost.
Yeah, in times gone by there was a huge great curtain wall that came out the front and protected a lot of the land that we have walked through. But this was the other side, this was outside the castle walls. And the reason they used to use yew trees is because they're very strong branches, but they're quite supple, so they would easily take the weight of a man. But when they hung them, they didn't want them to die straight away, they wanted to make them suffer. So instead of hanging them by the neck, as you would imagine, they might tie the rope around their feet and hang them upside down, or they might tie them up, you know, that way and put all the pressure on their shoulders. Or sometimes they even tied them around the waist and hung them horizontally, and they just leave them for hours, even days, to slowly pass away. And then they'd leave them, as I say, they wouldn't bury them, and it would be an example to others to stay away, keep away from the castle, which was a secret military base. And it was a punishment, you know, if you weren't buried, then your soul wasn't going to go to heaven.
Yeah, lovely.
So we do get spiritual activity down here. A lot of people have seen shadowy figures, the odd voice. And interestingly, people have seen the images of small children up in the branches. And we think that that may be something to do with people who lived in the local little settlements would sneak up here and try to pick anything of value from the bodies. You know, clothing particularly was quite valuable, and whatever else they might have, if indeed they had anything, because, you know, the soldiers would probably pinch what was worth taking in the first place.